particularly, I mean, I've worked in a few academies. After the Sunday, you'd speak to somebody, what was the score? It's like, well, I'll tell you the score, but I'd rather tell you about these 3 players and these 3 players, that 3 that have done really well, 3 that maybe struggled today, and then we've got a few in the middle that have done all right as well. So actually, maybe the culture is about, well, what was the score? So we're actually saying, well, the score doesn't exist, it doesn't matter, but our behaviours don't match what we're saying, because we're asking about the score a lot. And really, I'd rather people ask me about, well, who did well today?
Welcome to the Liverpool FA podcast. Our aim is to provide regular insight from a variety of experts to help you in your own football journey. We'll do it through interviews, roundtable discussions, and by linking to other resources to help support you. For more information about each episode, just tap the album art, which will provide you with more about our guests and links to further content.
Hello again and welcome back. It's been a while. I hope you've had a good start to your season wherever you're coaching. We have loads going on at the County FA around CPD events and courses, which you can find more about at liverpoolfa.com. And there's some big news if you are a coach in an affiliated club and you don't yet have your level 1. Look out and keep in touch with your club secretary, because we've got some big news coming up soon. This episode was recorded last Christmas, as I'm still working my way through the back catalogue of recordings from last season. Today's guest is a good friend and former colleague of mine, Matt Craddock. Matt used to work in our grassroots coach development team in the Northwest and is now head of coaching at a championship club academy. Matt is one of the most committed and passionate coaches I know, and we talk about all things player and coach development. So I hope you enjoy this one as much as I did. Matt Craddock. Matt, welcome back to Liverpool. Good to have you down here.
Morning.
Yeah, great to see you again. And it's been a while. And just before we hit record, you were telling me a story about Christmas lists. Yeah. So I thought that might be a good place for us to start. Do you want to tell us the problems that you've been having?
Yeah, well, we had a lovely afternoon in Brockles, just off the M61, where we did a Santa hunt, when we wrote a letter to Santa. Went to find a stamp and then put it in the postbox. So I was looking at my daughter, she's 7, and she'd written a lovely letter to Santa, how well she's done, and then the dreaded list started, and it was the most frightening list I think I've ever seen. So it was a bit of a chat around, I'm not sure how big Santa's sleigh is, so you might need to just manage your expectations really about what it is that you are going to get when it comes Christmas Day. But yeah, it was funny, it was a good day out, but it was a bit of a lesson, I think.
And then managing expectations is a nice link into where we're going to go with this, because last night we put out on Twitter asking for some questions that coaches out there would like to ask of you, and we have had a mountain.
I've seen.
So it's actually taken us probably an hour to try and map this conversation out, and I think it's just about managing the expectations of all those questions or the people that wrote all those questions in. So we will try and get through them all. I think it's given us a great starting point and a roadmap for this discussion. Matt, if you want to tell us a bit about your current role and maybe your pathway and your journey and how you got into that.
Yeah, so my current role is head of coaching, head of academy coaching. I guess my sort of career started, I went to university, I didn't know really what to do at 17, 18, so I went to university, found myself a sports science and physiology degree, came out of uni and couldn't get a coaching job. And I went into a year working in pensions, which was boring to say the least, and then I was just doing about 4 or 5 part-time coaching roles just to try and get myself some experience, get myself foot in the door. I started working with a local authority in Blackpool, working in schools, community sessions, and then that sort of progressed really. We had quite a forward-thinking line manager who wanted to have a pathway really for coaches, because she was spotting that good coaches were coming in and then having to move on because there was no progression. And basically my role kept progressing, and I got so much experience, it ended up with me being sort of a support network for PE teachers in schools, and that was primary schools, secondary schools and colleges as well. So it was a fantastic experience, and I got to learn loads and loads and loads. And then from there I got myself a role with the FA, working with 12 to 16s, which is obviously where we met. And then that role changed into a coach developer. I almost said educator, but coach developer role, where I did a lot of coach development in the Northwest, mainly around sort of Manchester area. And then I had an opportunity really to come and join into the professional game as head of coaching and lead youth development phase. It was a joint role, and I was probably missing working with players, so it was a real good opportunity for me to get my hands dirty, because some of the anecdotes I was using as a tutor were getting a bit outdated, and I wanted to try and put my learnings into practice. So it was a really good role. I had a year doing the joint role, and then we sort of have improved the academy again and got another member of staff in. So my role now is just head of coaching, and I sort of look after the coaching curriculum, coach development, working with players, working with coaches, and basically it's around trying to improve standards and ensure that the academy is doing what it's supposed to be doing, which is creating players that can go and play first team football.
So are you working with a group now, or solely just with the coaches?
Yeah, my week it's varied really, which is great for me because I love that variety. But I do a lot of work with the under-18s. I do a lot of work with the 15s and 16s, and then I do sort of various dipping in and dipping out of all the other age groups really. So because of my role last year, I have a good indication of all the players really, and I know most of the players, or all of the players really, in the academy. So I get to work with all of them, but majority is sort of 15 to 18, and then the rest of my role is working with the coaching staff.
Just winding back a little bit, you said about earlier on when you were just starting to get into coaching, you had 4 or 5 part-time coaching roles.
Yeah.
What were they? Can you describe a little bit more about them?
Yeah, so I worked in an academy that was local to my sort of job in Blackpool, which gave me a real experience of working with, good players and in a quite a competitive environment. I also worked part-time at a local authority. I worked part-time for a private company, and I was just doing as many coaching hours as I possibly could. So I'd go from one evening where I'd be doing a coaching session on a park with 4 people that just turned up randomly, to then working with a private company where I had 20 kids that turn up every week, to then going and working in a school and then into an academy in the evening. So it was a real variety. But I think what it did give me, it gave me a real good understanding of coaching. It gave me an ability to manage numbers and be flexible in coaching, because you can't always have 8v8 and this pitch. Sometimes you are on a tiny bit of a park and you've got 3 kids that rock up, and it gave me a good sort of a value really of what I've got now. Particularly, I'm in such a healthy, good environment at the moment. I appreciate it more because I've done those shifts that were difficult, to say the least. Yeah,
there's a lot of people out there listening and nodding their heads in agreement.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
And empathy and understanding about those challenges of numbers and space. But like you say, really important experiences, and that those varied experiences, I think, can really help to shape the coach that you then might go on to become.
Yeah, massively so. I mean, I think the minute I started working in an academy, and I got made redundant from the council, so I was working at the academy, and I just kept turning up. And asking if there was anything I could do. And when you ask, you actually get opportunities, which was unbelievable, really. And sometimes I'd be working with, the development squad of this particular academy, and I'd be given 8 players, and then 10 minutes later it'd be 6 players, and then by the time I got out there I had 3 players, and one of them was a goalkeeper. And I think if I hadn't have had that grounding of having to deal with different numbers and different environments and different situations, it could have probably tipped you over the edge. I mean, it was fairly stressful, but it was manageable because I think I've had that experience of having to deal with different things and changes and flexibility.
And just out of curiosity, so when you work with your squad of players now, for example the 18s or the 16s, how prepared are you for a session? So, for example, do you know exactly how many numbers are coming? How much change or fluctuation do you have to deal with? There
still is, because there's various things that can happen. You could pick up injuries, you can have illnesses. The first team staff might want some players. So there is that flexibility, but we have a meeting prior to going out to training, so we know exactly who's going to be training. We know what we're doing, who's doing what and when, what are the outcomes, and we can individualise our session a little bit more. So we still have to be sort of flexible because it can change, but we do have a lot of time really to sort of really put some planning into what the session looks like and who it is that we're working with and how can we help them.
What are the success measures for you and your academy within the wider remit of the club?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I guess it's measured on how many how many players we can get into the first team, I guess, is the overarching aim, and that's what we reach for. But really, we want to make sure that we can provide players with the opportunities to get a career in the game, whether that's at our club or at other clubs or as a coach or as whatever it is. We want to make sure that we give them that opportunity to get a career in the game, really, and that's what we go into work for every day. But obviously for the club, it's about how many players can we get into that first team. That's any club would be the same measurement tool, really.
So you've been in this role 2 years now?
Yeah, coming up to 2 years. Yeah.
So what have been some of the success stories that you've been most proud about?
Good question. I think there's probably there's loads. A couple of good ones is a player's gone into the first team and he's absolutely flown at the moment. That's really positive because it's a massive step from under 18 football into the Championship, because some of the teams in the Championship are unbelievable. So the fact that he actually has done so, is a massive achievement for the club. Not particularly for me, as I said, I've only been there sort of 2 years, but the amount of the players and staff that have worked with him over that period. So that's really positive, and we've actually got quite a lot of graduates in and around the squad at the moment, which is good. But then, at the other scale, we've had some coaches that have moved from a part-time role into a full-time role within the club, that have progressed from being a volunteer to being a part-time member of staff, and some that have been a part-time member of staff and gone on to a full-time role somewhere else. So I think success is, there's various different ways that we can measure success, but we've had quite a few in the last probably 2 years. Yeah,
I suppose, and for you in your role, that the success can be measured not only just by the development of the players, but the development of the coaches.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%.
Okay. Etriple-P.
Yeah.
I'm curious. So tell us some of your experiences, and obviously you came into it not long after, I suppose, halfway down the line. So what has been your role within the remit of the Etriple-P? If you can just explain the process that you've gone through in your own club.
Yeah, well, everyone has a different view of the Etriple-P. For me, it's about intentions, really. I think the Etriple-P, the intention is really positive because it's about raising standards. So the Etriple-P is basically a guide that you have to work to, criteria that you need to meet, and from my point of view, it's about making sure that all our coaches have the requirements to be working in an academy, and then the skills to be able to enhance what they do in the academy. So we have to make sure that they're all CRB checked, which is obvious, but then they have to have UEFA B, they have to have the youth award, they have to have regular CPD. So there's certain a real easy tick list that you need to go through to make sure that they have that. The wider academy, there's various different criteria that you have to meet. So there's many different sections. One might be about education, one might be about the players, one might be about the club, and basically they provide you like a criteria that you need to work to make sure that we've got the processes in place to be able to provide a good quality of service to the players that we're working with, because they're kids at the end of the day. So it's very similar to like an Ofsted process, where Ofsted go in to make sure the school is working to a good standard so that they're providing for the kids. Etriple-P is the same. It's the same principle, really, and for that you can't really be negative about it because it's trying to improve standards.
So tell us a bit more about the detail that sits within the you mentioned the education process there. So what would fall underneath that?
So obviously the under-18s are full-time. So they come in at sort of 16, 17, 18 years old. So they still have to take part in education. So they train with us full-time, but they also do education around it. This year we've done a little bit of a flexible approach to education. So actually they have bits of education every day. So it's not just one day where they have education all day, and if they miss it, they miss all their week's education. We're quite flexible, and actually we do it on site now. So that's a real positive step, because it's allowed the programme to be bespoke to the kids, which is, we've been talking about individualising programmes, and no better way of individual education for the kids that we've got in. So that's the under-18s, and then for the 15s and 16s we run a hybrid programme where they come out of school for half a day on a Friday, where they come into the academy, we train during the afternoon, and then they pick up the education session later in the day. So we have qualified teachers in that come in and support them through this catch-up period. And then for the 9s to 14s, it's just about regular links with the school. We've talked about many times, and particularly in our last role around in coach development, how important the relationship between the club and the parent is. We've actually got the school on board as well. So the EPP around education is just about making sure that we're considering everything that the kid is going through, not just football. It has to be about education, and it varies on levels of requirements. The older they get, there's more requirements in place, but it's just about making sure that we've thought about it and we've planned it. How does education look like for these players? How are we supporting them with their education? Have we considered it, and are we helping them?
So how many different schools are you dealing with then in your own area?
A lot. Yeah, a lot. So I guess the PDP, the 18s, they're on one site.
PDP?
Under 18s, professional development phase.
Yeah.
So they're on one site with one education provider. Really quite simple. 9s to 16s, they come from all over the northwest. Anywhere within an hour of where we are. That could be 100 schools. A lot of different schools. So, depending on what phase they're in, depends on how strong that link is with each school. The older they get, the stronger the link is, because they're coming towards GCSEs. So we try and meet with them, throughout the year. We speak to them regularly. We ask how they're getting on, making sure that they're still progressing and trying hard in school. And then the younger they are, it's almost just touching base with them every now and then to say, listen, this is what your pupil's been doing at the academy. How's he getting on in school? Is there anything we can help with? So we have a head of education that sort of looks after that area, and we have intervention strategies. So if anything drops off at school, there's a strategy that comes into place, and there's processes in place that we can go and support the school to help support the kid.
How does that look then? So you've got, let's say, school comes to you and they've got problems with one of their pupils who's at your academy who's underperforming or perhaps misbehaving in school. How do you pick it up from there?
Yeah, well, it goes off what the school want, really. There's been plenty of occasions where we've gone into school. So if they've organised a meeting between maybe the parent and the head of year, we go in on that meeting. And basically, it's just about kids just need things relating to their world. And if their world is football, it's really handy for us to be there from the football world to say, listen, if this was in a football match or a training session, how would you behave? How would you want your teammates to behave? What standards do you have? And it's about relating what they do in school to what they do with us in the academy. And I think, so really our role is just to go in there and just sort of shine a light on what they're doing, how it differs maybe to how they are in the academy, and trying to join the dots really for them so that they can pick up where they left off. And I guess that's what our job is, really. I think we've been into school maybe twice last year, twice this year, but generally, we've got good kids. Kids are good, aren't they? Generally, anyway. But we've got good kids. But I think it's what helps us keep that number down is the proactive work that we do before then. I think if we didn't do any work up to that point, that might be, you might have to be reacting to problems that are coming, rather than actually just saying, listen, we have a really good link with your school. We speak to your teacher on a weekly basis, so we know exactly what's going on. It's that proactive work that makes them think, even if they were thinking about messing around, I'm probably not going to, because I know that I'll get back to the academy and, I better try hard. So there's a lot of proactive work that goes in that means that there's less interventions having to happen.
Yeah, and I can imagine that the response that you might get back from the boys there might be a positive one of, feeling cared for, that they're actually valued. Yeah, definitely,
and that's the truth. We're not good coaches if we don't care about the kids that we're working with. End of story. We have to care about the kids first, and they have to understand that we care about them. And the education part and that sort of strategy is just, like you said, it's just reinforcing the fact that we do care about them and want them to do well. And the reality, talking back to managing expectations, excuse me, the reality of people that are going to become a professional is really low. It's really, really small. Really, really slim chance of you becoming that professional. So you have to work hard in education so that if or when you leave the club, you're in a good position to go and do something else and be really positive and step forward in the right direction.
Yeah.
Rather than just leaving it all to put all of your eggs into one basket and dreaming about becoming a footballer, which there's nothing wrong with dreaming, by the way, but you have to make sure that you've got a backup plan and you're actually developing holistically, not just in one direction.
How important is it to manage that expectation with those, the hit rate? We know about the numbers. So how do you get that message across?
Well, yeah, I think people think it's a negative thing to tell kids and their parents that not many people become professionals, but that's the reality of it. And I think we need to make sure that everyone has enough information to make informed decisions. So I think it's really important for us to say, when we educate our kids and our parents, throughout a number of CPD events throughout the season. It's mentioned in our induction at the start of every season when all the parents come in and we talk about what we're going to be doing this season, and that's part of that workshop, is around showing them that very few people become professional footballers, very few. So really you need to make sure that your child is working hard in school and has other interests, and that's really important, and it's about education. It's about educating the parent, it's about educating the child as well, just to make them aware really of the importance of school and other interests.
And I'm guessing that's not just a one-off at the start of the season, that from working with plenty of football parents myself, it's that continuous message and
drip feeding, yeah, all the time. It's reminding, it's reinforcing, all the time. And it's not as in I'm reminding them all the time that, listen, not many people become professionals. It's not about knocking them down. It's just reminding them that school's important. When they turn up to training, how was school today? How are you getting on? Are you still, how's your teacher there? How's this going on? It's just about reinforcing those other things. So it's not all about football. They're still kids. They're still kids, and you need to touch base with other things. So it's doing it subtly. It's not, it's not me walking around with a percentage sign to remind them. It's just about saying, how was school today? How are you getting on? Are you all ready for your exam next week? How was your mocks this week? That sort of stuff.
Those first interactions when the players turn up can often tell the players exactly what you value about them, can't it?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and if it is only football, it's a really limited, it's a really limited experience. Whereas if you find stuff out about the kid, how are you getting on at swimming? There's a kid in our place he's a fighter, so he does like, I can't remember the code, but it's like MMA. It's brutal. It's nothing I'd be getting into, but yeah, I mean, I would never argue with this kid either, to be fair. But it's recognising that all the kids, he's just one kid that has something that's going on outside of football. All the kids have something, and it's about finding out what it is, so that when they do turn up, you can go, I saw that the other day, I saw that on Twitter, or I saw that video of you doing that, or how was that today? How's this? And it's just about knowing. I mean, it's the same old thing. Knowing, it's about knowing who you work with, knowing your players.
Yeah, and the return on investment from that, I imagine, is quite significant.
Yeah, massive. And we have, the kids have good relationship with the coaches, and if you have good relationships, you can get more done.
Yeah, so that gives us a real good idea about how you work with the local schools. What about the grassroots clubs out there? How do you link in with them? What's the sort of relationship like? How does it work?
Yeah, again, it's important. I mean, we've got a head of recruitment that's really proactive out in clubs. We have partner clubs in grassroots. We give kit, we give stuff out, we invite in. So we did a grassroots conference, I think, last year, where we invited all the coaches in to see what we do at the academy and give them a bit of a presentation about some ideas and what they might want to do and how we do things here. We're planning on doing another one sort of next year as well, 2018. So there's various different ways of interacting, but it's vital. It's vital because that's where the kids are playing. That's where the kids are getting coached, and eventually, we're either going to spot a player who wants to come into our academy, or there might be a player leaving who we need to find somewhere for them to go, and that might, if you have good relationships with people in clubs, there's just a two-way street that works really well.
Yeah, and that's something that you're quite proactive about, is it? So if the time comes when a player is going to be released, then how do you try and find them that way back into football?
It's 100%. It's about having relationships so that you can help them. If they want to be helped, you can help them find that next step. That's our job. I mean, that's probably the horrible part of the job, is doing that, because youth development's a long-term thing. But at times during that long-term journey, you have to take a snapshot decision, or a decision on on a point in time, and it's really difficult. And because you're making a decision at a point in time over a long journey, you're never 100% right. You just have to try and make an informed decision. But if you do, if it is leaving the club, if the person is leaving the club, we've got to make sure that firstly they've had a good experience while they've been with us, and secondly we help them with that next bit if they want the help. And without those relationships, you can't really help them with that next bit. So again, it's about being proactive to be able to support them afterwards.
Just winding back, you talked about shaping the wider curriculum and the sort of longer term plan for the development of the players and coaches within your club. How important is that vision, if you like, of the way that you want to, the way that your club sees the game being played, and how is there any sort of link with what's going on with the first team? How does that work?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was probably Ben Bartlett's episode of the podcast where he talked about aligning behaviours to your intended outcomes. So if you don't know where you want to go and what you want at the end, it's going to be very difficult for you to select the right behaviours and select the right processes to get there. So I guess your club vision and your club philosophy is almost about, it's your end point, it's what you want at the end of it. And the end of it might be 21, 22, 23, but it's about what that player looks like at that age. And we've just got to work backwards from there to have a guideline to say, well, if I want this, I need to choose this behaviour. How does it link to the first team? Yeah, very, very well. We had a Cpd event with the first team manager and the first team staff, and they were really positive. Gave us some advice on, what they're looking for in players, and it's very similar to what we do in the academy. It aligns to our sort of philosophy and our values, and they're ultra supportive, and they're really supportive, and our 18s, have a lot of opportunities to go and work with the first team, and that's a really positive experience for them. But it has to be a club, it has to be a collective about, this is what we want from the club, this is what we want the club to look like, and the players who play for this club to look like, and then you've got to work back from there, really.
Obviously you're well aware of the England DNA and the work that's gone on with that, around the detail of how we want the England teams to play, what the players need to be able to do to be able to play in that system. How does that translate into your own club, if at all? And what were some of the messages that might run right the way through the academy to the first team?
Yeah, I mean, I think the England DNA is positive. It's a step forward because it's a sort of like a point in the sand to say, this is what we stand for, this is what we are, this is what we're trying to do. So there's nothing negative in that. I think that's a real positive thing to do, and I think every club has their own DNA. Every club does. Some aspects will be similar because we're all trying to create footballers, and footballers are similar but different. So there'll be parts of our philosophy that will be the same as most clubs, and then there'll be parts that are really specific to ours. And I think that's what the England DNA has done well, is that they've actually decided, no, this is what England players look like, this is what England players do, and this is how they do it. So I think that's a positive step, and we're no different. We have our club values that runs throughout under 9s, under 8s, all the way up to first team. It's almost like the FA use that as a golden thread that connects everything, and it's the same principle. We don't use the same language, but it's the same principle about having these values, that this is what our club player looks like, this is how they behave, and this is what we expect from them, and this is what we expect from each other.
And so what might some of that language sound like? Yeah,
so I'll pick one. So it's about work rate. So our club, our players work hard, and that's something that's specific to, all players should work hard, but that's something that we really value. So all our players work hard. So if you look at an under 9 player, when we haven't got the ball, they should be working hard to try and win the ball back. If you're looking at an 18 player, they should be working hard, but maybe with some intelligence and game management to win that ball back. So that's how the thread. You've got to realise it looks different from 18s to 12s to 9s. It will look different, but the fact that they're working hard, that's something that will be ingrained, throughout all of them. And
how do you as coaches hold yourselves accountable to that, to those values that I suppose then translates across to the players?
Yeah, well, we've got to live them. If we we value people that work hard, and people that are good learners, we've got to do the same thing.
Yeah.
You can't say we want people that work hard and then us, shirking off and don't fancy doing that bit, or I've not planned that session. It doesn't work. You've got to align, like I said before, align your behaviours to what you want to get out in the end. So if we want people that are working hard, we better be working hard on our planning. We better be working hard on how we individualise our session, and we better be working hard during the session and after the session. And it's the same with any of the values that we choose. Honesty is another one. About being honest is difficult at times because it's not always positive, but we have to be honest. So that means when I'm working with a coach, I've got to be honest. So if there's something that isn't happening that should be happening, I've got to be able to say that. Otherwise, I'm not living the values of the club.
And I can imagine that, knowing you and knowing the way that you work, I would imagine you'd want that honesty to be two-way.
Oh, 100%, yes, 100%.
So how do you encourage that honesty from the players back to the coaches, if at all?
Yeah, well, it's open dialogue, and I think that's key. It's communicate. It's two ways. It's not just the coach doesn't know all the answers. The coach knows some bits, and the players know some bits, and it's about us working together to try and merge that information to help the player enhance what they know and how they can implement it. So it has to be two-way. So a lot of our work, you'll see our coaches working on question and answer, trying to actually get some information out of the players, asking them about this session. What might this session look like? Why is it looking like this? How can we make it better? And actually getting them to maybe come up with some of the ideas. So you'll see from all our coaches that it's not just one way. This is what we're doing today. This is how we're doing it. Do that, do this. It's more two-way, involving them in the process.
What age do those behaviours start at with the
right
kids?
At the start.
Yeah.
Right at the start.
So how would that look and feel with your youngest age group is?
Under 9.
Under 9s. How did that...
Chaos. Chaos.
Go on.
Oh, absolute chaos. So we have... But it's... That's where learning is taking place, isn't it? They're learning about things. So, for example, it might be, how can we make the game more difficult? Or how can we make it harder for the defenders in this game? And they might come up with an idea that you think, wow, that's going to be a right mess. But if you don't go with it, you're not valuing the question in the first place. So you go with it and you see what happens. And if it's chaos, all right, okay, right, relax there. What did that look like, lads? And you try and have to go with it. So what does it look like when it's younger? It looks chaos. Yeah, it looks messy. It looks disjointed at times. But that's what the game looks like at that age anyway. So you've got to be aware of that, and you've got to accept it.
I picked up on something you said before about that end point and working back from there. So what was what was the end point that you and your club have in mind for the players, and what's the process that you work back from there in order to generate the way that you want to work with your coaches and your players?
Well, I mean, the end point is the game, isn't it? That's the end point, I guess, for everything that we're looking at. So it's where do our first team play? What does that game look like? And what do the players need to have to be able to thrive in that environment? So if you take, for example, I mean, links into the DNA, but game management, about game understanding. So if we want people that understand the game and can make good decisions, then they need to be able to have plenty of opportunities to make decisions, good or bad. They need to be able to manage the game themselves, and sometimes that might mean them losing because they made the wrong decision. So it links back. So if we want good decision makers, we need to be patient throughout. We need to make sure that our practices are random, so they get loads of decisions to make during their practice. We need to have coaching interventions that allows them to do the talking and try and work out the right answer. And then we need to be able to support them when it doesn't work right for them, so that we can talk about, well, what decision did you make? What happened? How might you do it next time? So that's a real simple example, really, to go from, what does the game for us, you're playing in front of 15,000 people, you're not going to hear the first team manager if you're a left back and you're on the other side of the pitch. So he has to be able to understand what the game looks like, and he has to be able to make decisions that are right there and then in that moment. And if he can't make decisions, he's going to really struggle when he's on the opposite side of the pitch. So if we have to be good at making decisions, we need to make sure that we're giving the players plenty of opportunities to make decisions, and then supporting them with their reflections on those decisions.
How many years would a coach stay with their squad within the club? So Or does the coach follow that group of players all the way through?
No, I mean, different clubs have different models. I've seen quite a few interesting ones where they work on a rotation. Some of them work on a rotation like on a 6-week basis. So I've seen a real variety. Ours at the moment, we work on a season basis, and then we reevaluate the coaches and the ages that they're working with, and combinations of the coaches that are working together, and we just try and make a decision that we think is for the best for the next season. That's how we currently work, but like we say, we're trying to improve every time. So if evidence comes to light that there's a better way of doing it, then we might be taking that on, but that's how we work at the moment.
So how important is that common set of behaviours within the coaches right the way through the club then?
Oh, it's essential. Yeah, it's essential.
And then do you have any sort of way that you systematically measure the coach behaviours, that you can kind of hold yourself account or develop or use that measurement to then measure yourself against?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting point. I guess I'll probably step back a little bit and describe where the head of coaching role is going. So the head of coaching role was brought in obviously by the EPPP in the Premier League about raising standards of coaching within every environment, but professionally in the professional game. And they're running. So they provide some funding for clubs to make sure that they can have a sole head of coaching, which is why my role changed from being a joint role to a single role, because of that introduction of funding. And then, as well as the funding, they're actually running a course for all the head of coachings that they can go and attend, and it's about developing, firstly, the softer skills, so mentoring, language, communication, all that sort of stuff, reflection, self-reflection, planning, all that sort of the softer sort of skills. But then it's also about looking at different ways of measuring quality, of measuring efficiency of programs, how we put our programs together, how a coach competency framework works, how appraisals work within coaching. So there's that big piece of work that's sort of going on nationally, and we're like a part of a cog within that big machine. So where we're up to at the moment, we have some things in place, but we're almost at the start of our head of coaching journey, where there's definitely progress to be made, I think, in all clubs really. But we do a lot of analysis of coaches. We do self-reflections. We have a website called Huddle, where we're starting to film sessions and put them up on Huddle, so that the coaches can go on, as well as the players, but the coaches can go on and analyse their session. What's the ball rolling look like? What interventions was I using? Am I just talking to one or two players, or am I talking to everybody? There's loads of different methods that we're trying to use at the moment, but I guess we're just at the start of that journey. So with regards to measuring the quality, I think it's about trying to provide the resource for the coaches to self-reflect, and then it's my job to almost support and facilitate their self-reflection and align them to what the club want, really.
The reason why I ask is, I don't know if you're aware, but recently work's just started here in Liverpool on 4 new Park Life sites.
Yeah, brilliant.
Which I think are just going to really revolutionise what
definitely.
The local grassroots scene might look like here in Liverpool. So, and we've got some huge grassroots clubs. Mm-hmm. The one just around the corner from where we are now has got over 100 teams.
Yeah.
So, if you were, let's say you were volunteering in a grassroots club and you were moving on to one of those sites next season, and you've got a number of volunteer coaches within the club, you've also got the parents, the club to school link. How might you go about that process of bringing everything together for a kind of common goal?
Well, great opportunity, first and foremost, I think it would be. I think it's about educating people first and foremost, because I think particularly football, people know football and they think they understand football, and a lot of people do, but there's a lot more to it than just the football stuff. So I think it's about educating everybody around the different facets of football and developing young people. So if I was to go about that, I would get all the coaching staff together, and I'd make sure that we all have a input into how we want this club to look like. What do we want it to be? What do we stand for? What are the things that we'll demand off each other, and what things are we flexible on and not flexible on? And I think once you understand that as a collective, you bring everyone else into that process as well. And it's about sharing the process. So this is what this club stands for. This is what we're going to do at this club. And if you don't like that, that's fine. That's not a problem. But that's how we're going to work it here. And if you want to be here, that's what we're going to do. And if you don't like it, you can go somewhere else. If you do buy into it, brilliant, buy into it, and we all buy into it together.
And I suppose that's the easy part of the process, isn't it? Is setting it.
The first part is the easy, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It's then living it.
Yeah. So what are some of the challenges that you've come across in living and breathing what you've set out to do, and how have you overcome them? Reality
gets in the way at times. It's very easy. I'm full time. I'm in there all the time, so it's easy for me to, because I'm immersed in it, and it's easy for me to sort of live by it and bring it to life. When you're a part-time member of staff, and this will be very similar to the volunteers that are working at the club, in the example you just gave me, you've got a job. You might get stuck at your job. It might be stressful. You might be late to your session. You turn up. You've got a bag of balls. You've got a load of kids that are already ready for you, and you know the realities, and the listeners will know exactly what I'm talking about. So I think it's about doing it consistently. It's difficult, but it needs reminding. And I think my job, and we have other full-time members of staff obviously as well, is about supporting the coaches so that they can live and breathe it. And that's whether that's education, whether that's helping with a setup, whether it's helping them with the coaching, whether it's putting their equipment out ready for them so that they're not having to go looking for equipment and then come out. It might be something as little as that. It might be something as big as co-coaching with them, just to ensure that the message is the same. So there's probably not a one size fits all. It comes back to people and about individualising your support. But it is. I mean, reality is difficult. 100% it is difficult.
How do you balance those outcomes around? What I mean by that is, so one of the questions that came in was around where do you sit in terms of results, performance, learning.
Yeah.
And I think one of the problems that I've found is that we've got this kind of polarized question, development or winning, and I think we've got to start moving away from that. Which camp do you sit in? Where do you plant your flag? So
the question is, where do you plant it?
where do you plant it? Where do you sit in the whole results, performance, learning?
Yeah, I think. I mean, we have a games program, so every Sunday, all the academy 9 to 16 is playing the games program, and then we organise additional stuff on top of that. So sometimes we might have midweek games, Saturday games, tournaments, competitions, festivals, futsal, a host of different things. The way we've sort of looked at it, and this is what we've sort of provided to our parents at the start when we talked about how we were going to set up for the season. The additional stuff is where we go and we really try and win. We try and win because we want to give them experience of how to win, because otherwise, where does that come in? If it's always about, we played well and that was okay. How do they develop that resilience, that grit, that determination to go and win? That understanding that we need to keep the ball in the corner to waste some time, or we need to pop the ball about to keep possession to waste time. Where do they learn that? So without going somewhere to win, I think we're not actually helping our kids out. But for our games program, we're not really bothered about the result. We're bothered about the individual performances within the result. So it's not about winning. They must want to win, because that's really important, because that's what professionals do. They have to win every weekend, and they want to win every weekend, and they want to win everything. But it's just an extension of training for us. The Sunday games is an extension of training. Our training is competitive and it's high intensity, and there's points on offer. So there's winners and losers all the time, because we want that competition. We want them to want to win. But we can't be winning a game over development. Winning is in when they're 21. That's winning. If they win for the first team, that's winning. Winning on a Sunday, it's not really winning, it's just a training session. It's another extension of training. But like I said, those additional games or tournaments we go to, that's when we put the pressure on them. We purposely put pressure on them, because we want them to feel that pressure and feel what it's like when you have to win, to see, so that we can learn from it.
Do you see much of a difference in the range of responses from the players when they lose a game in your games program on a Sunday compared to, say, losing in a tournament? Is there any difference?
Kids are funny. They're individual and they're pretty tough and don't really care that much at times. So some of the kids will be hurt, and you can see them really hurting. Some of the kids will be laughing and having a bit of a joke with each other, and that doesn't really vary between a festival and a games program. Obviously, in a tournament, if they go far and they lose, they're hurting, and you can see that hurt. But then it's the skill of the coach to talk about the learning opportunity that they've just had, how well they've done, but how would they do it better. But kids, you know what it's like. We talk about it on the courses. Kids forget about the result pretty quickly. They forget about it. And I think we can't just hang on to it. We need to let it go as well.
Yeah. To
the point where, on a Sunday, do we need to ask? Because this is something that you talk about in the clubs, particularly. I mean, I've worked in a few academies. After the Sunday, you'd speak to somebody. What was the score? It's like, well, I'll tell you the score, but I'd rather tell you about these 3 players and these 3 players, 3 that have done really well, 3 that maybe struggled today, and then we've got a few in the middle that have done all right as well. So actually, maybe the culture is about, well, what was the score? What was the score? So we're actually saying, well, the score doesn't exist, it doesn't matter, but our behaviours don't match what we're saying, because we're asking about the score a lot. And really, I'd rather people ask me about, well, who did well today? How did we perform? Yeah. Did we play out from the back? Because that's what we've been working at all week. So it's a big culture change, but
yeah, that reminds me.
So I don't know if that answered your question, but
yeah.
It's in the middle. It has to be a hybrid of the two.
Yeah.
The results will be important at some stage. So we have to be able to teach them to deal with it when it is important. But at this moment, it isn't important. So we have to add that pressure onto them at times, purposefully and thoughtfully. But we have to make sure that they experience it, because the first time they experience it can't be playing for the first team. Can't be. So we have to make sure that they've experienced it.
So you've got a real justification for why, because if and when they do step up into that first team environment, when 3 points, potentially people's jobs are at stake, they've got to be able to handle that pressure.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's where the difference comes between the elite environment and the grassroots game, isn't it?
Yeah. I think that having a justification is probably the main thing, because what it means is that you've thought about it and you've considered it. If you haven't got a justification, if you can't justify why, then I think that you probably need to have a good think about what you're doing, and to make sure that you understand why you're doing it. Because there's a place for everything. There's a place, just take coaching. There's a place for command. There's a place for question and answer. As long as you understand why you're using it, then that's okay.
But I guess it's not like you're being nasty to the players. It's not that you're bullying them into winning this game.
No. Well, I'll tell you a story this week. We played away in the youth cup, and we were down in London, and we got to watch one of the younger kids from this club train. So we were having a very nice cup of coffee, looking out over this indoor 3G dome, which was beautiful. And I think, from what I was looking at, I think they were under 10s maybe, and they were having a penalty shootout. And you're trying to replicate what a penalty shootout feels like. And they've got a goal, they've got a keeper, and they've got the 2 teams lined up. Just looks like a penalty shootout. The only additions are, one of the coaching staff had a video phone and was filming the penalty shootout. And the other coach was stood with a megaphone where the penalty spot was. So one was filming, one had a megaphone. So as they stood up, megaphone, was giving him loads of grief, ready to step up to take his penalty. When he missed, video phone was in his face, like looking at him, and all the lads were laughing, and it was a great environment. And it comes back to something, Pete Sturgis said, stuck with me, that we need to create an environment where we can throw the kitchen sink at the kids, because they have to be able to deal with it. But it has to be an environment that can support them when it gets tough. And that summed that quote up for me, because they were getting grief, they had pressure. It was really getting them to practice being in such a harsh environment, but it was in such a safe environment. And I thought it was a fantastic bit, and I enjoyed that coffee, and I enjoyed watching that session, because I just thought, you know what, a brilliant bit of coaching and good justification of why they were doing it. And I thought it was spectacular. So sometimes maybe we are horrible, but as long as there's a thought behind it and the environment's safe, I think it's okay.
So what are some of the methods that you use in your own practice at the club to enable that environment where the kitchen sinks can be thrown around?
Yeah, well, you've got to create the environment first. We've got to be consistent and we've got to be positive with the kids. So we've got to realise that the kids need to realise that we're here for them, we care about them, and we're trying to help them. And once they sort of get that, then you can start stretching them, making them feel uncomfortable at times when it's needed, because they all need to feel the best, the worst, the strongest, the quickest, the slowest. So they need to be able to experience that full range of positives and negatives. We talked about speed bumps. So this year we introduced it to the players and the parents about how we were going to ensure that the players throughout their time at the academy have speed bumps. And a speed bump is, a negative in the road. It's something that slows them down. It's something that makes them think, oh God, this was difficult. I've not experienced that before. Something that's going to make them think. It could be a negative. It could be something that just makes them feel uncomfortable, takes them out of their comfort zone, maybe even to their panic zone, but somewhere where they're not always there, and they have to call on things that they don't use and develop skills that they haven't quite developed yet. So we talked about stuff like that. I mean, what does it look like? It looks like anything from being substituted, for example, is a speed bump. They have to be able to deal with being subbed or not starting or not finishing a game, or maybe not playing that weekend, or maybe playing for a different age group that weekend. Maybe it's they're playing up an age group or across age group, or maybe they're an under 13 by date of birth, but maybe they're playing for the under 12s this weekend, or maybe they're playing for the under 14s this weekend. Anything that sort of gives them that feeling of uncertainty, because it'll develop stuff like resilience, grit, determination, coping strategies. So we call them speed bumps, and we try and ensure that everyone in the academy has speed bumps throughout their journey, because if they just have a journey that goes from the floor upwards, by the time they get to first team, they won't have developed the coping strategies or the resilience that will be needed. Because if you sign a first year professional deal, you're not going straight into the squad. You're not going to play every game. You're not going to, sometimes you might travel to an away game and not even be in the squad. So you've gone all that way and actually you don't do anything. And then when the game finishes, what do you have to do? You might have to train because you haven't played. So there's plenty of things that when you actually, if you are lucky enough to get that far, if that's your first experience, that could be a real negative experience. You might not recover from that. So we need to make sure that they've experienced everything possibly that they could experience by the time they get to that stage. And that's plenty of positives, but it has to be the odd negative as well.
And are these speed bumps, are they discussed or shared with the player beforehand, or is it dropped on them? What's the process that you go through?
Again, as long as you've thought about it, there's not a one size fits all. So sometimes it's dropped on them straight away. Bang, deal with that. Let's see how you deal with it. It might be that it's something that we discuss with the parents and the players, that over the next couple of weeks we're going to try and develop this. I worked with a player the other day. Basically, every time that the referee makes a decision, he doesn't react well to it. So every time during the game, I kept giving the decision against him. Every single decision, even if it was obvious. Foul, corner. No, it wasn't a corner, just to see how he dealt with it. And I talked to him afterwards about, why do you think I did that? Yeah, because of my reaction. So it could be as simple as that about refereeing decisions, but there has to be something where it's a negative and it is exactly what it says, a bump in the road that makes them slow down and reevaluate where they are and learn something new that they haven't learnt before.
Yeah, and again, is this something that starts literally at under nines right the way through?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it has to be. Obviously, it looks different because the game looks different, but yeah, it has to be all the time. Yeah. So
again, another question that came in was about the work that you've been doing in the psychosocial corners. So what else are you working with in those areas with the players in your club?
Self-awareness, I think, is massive, and an understanding of how the brain works. So we have, a company that's developed a really good website that we have resources on and worksheets on that we can work with them. We do that with the under-18s and the 15s, 16s a lot, and then we do CPD workshops with parents and the younger kids as well. So we might, at the end of last season, for example, we did a mindset workshop in one room and a safeguarding workshop in the other. So we put all the parents through a safeguarding children workshop, and then we put all the kids through a growth mindset workshop. Both at the same time, went up to the stadium, 2 lovely little rooms, tea and coffee on for the parents, juice on for the boys, and we discussed, some of the things around what a growth mindset is, how the brain works, why do you feel like this sometimes, and how can we help you deal with it? And moving forward, what can we do? What can you do that will, improve you and your game? So we do plenty of stuff like that. I think it's, again, similar to what you mentioned before about having, is it one or the other, win or performance? I think it has to be integrated in everything that you do. It has to be part of your coaching. It can't just be, today I'm going to work on this. It has to be part of your coaching. And sometimes you might shine the light on one area more than the other, but all areas are sort of working. I think that's Stuart Delaney, who's our FA coach, educator, developer. Was a phrase that he used about how you shine the light maybe more on one area at times than the others. And I thought that was a real good analogy, because there might be a session going on, and for you, I might just be shining the light in the social corner for you because of something that's going on, or maybe that's what we're working on. But for your teammate, I might be really shining the light in a technical corner for him. And that's where it comes down to, individualising your coaching sessions. So I would say we do a lot about it, and I think a lot of clubs now are sort of cottoning on to the idea that actually this is really important. So we do interventions to sort of support it and shine a light on an area or a focus, but then it has to be integrated in your coaching sessions as well.
So what's the process that you go through to start to individualise this for each of the players, or what is the process that your coaches are even going through? Yeah,
so I mean, to make it easier, every player has an individual learning plan to which they reevaluate every 6 weeks. The individual learning plan is a SMART target, really. It's about what am I work? What do I need to improve? How am I going to do it? Who's going to help me, and how can I measure it? And we have 2 terms. We have a super strength and we have an area of development. And we define it as a super strength is something that's why you're here. That's what you do that's really special to you. An area of development is something that you're really keen on working on or improving, or it's been highlighted to you that you need to work on and improving. The players take a lead on this. So they highlight what each area is. They meet with the coach. We talk about it. We commit it to some paper. Actually a laptop, but we commit it to the laptop, and we work on it over the 6 weeks. So we have an idea of they're working on these 2 things for the next 6 weeks. Obviously, the topic might change because you might be working on playing out from the back or then playing through midfield a few weeks later, but they're still working on those 2 things.
Yeah. So how would that link in with the overall team objectives? So you said it's a 6-week cycle. Does it change every 6 weeks? It depends.
It depends on how the meeting goes, really. The older they go, we want them to bring evidence to these meetings. So we've got Huddle. So the 16s can clip on Huddle, which is an analysis website, and they can go, look, here's the number of times I passed forward in January, and here we are in March, and here's a clip of me in the last game, how many times I've passed forward. So we want them to sort of lead it and bring evidence. The younger ones, we include the parents with them, and we say, go on, tell us how you've done, what have you been doing over the last 6 weeks? We've seen a real improvement in here. Should you carry on with it? Do you think you need to work on it a bit longer, or are you ready to move on to something else? To be honest, the actual process of that is more important than that itself. So actually, them being able to self-reflect and come up with a plan for themselves and review their own performance, I mean, we're developing learners there. So actually, what it looks like isn't the massive issue. The fact that they can do it and start to self-reflect and start to evaluate their performance and start to put an action plan together, that's probably more important.
So what have been the range of responses that you've had back from the players when you've involved them in this individualised planning?
Very, very, very different. Very different, depending on, are they doing it themselves? Have they got support from the parents? Have they listened to the coach, or have they spent a lot of time on it? Have they just put down whatever? It's real variance. But when you hand things over to the kids, that's what you're going to get. You're going to get a mixed bag because they're kids. So you just got to be aware that, listen, we're handing responsibility of this over to you lot. We need to understand as coaches, what do we get back? It's going to be messy. It is going to be messy. So we've had some that have said, score more goals, and we've had some that have said, I want to try and receive and play forward on my first touch in central areas. There's two real contrasting individual learning plans, and what we've got to do is we've got to work with the one who says, score more goals. Well, can you control that? Do you have control over how many goals you score, or is there something else that you can maybe choose that links to scoring goals that you can control more? So maybe about how often do you receive it in goal scoring opportunities, or how often are you getting shots on target, or things that they can actually control. That's what we work with him. The other one, we can actually start working with his technical work, and is he actually meeting his ILP, individual learning plan?
Yeah. Go back to that grassroots analogy.
Yeah.
Let's say you're volunteering with a team, you can choose the age.
Yeah.
What sort of process would you go about to replicate that kind of principle in a grassroots environment?
Could be as simple as a A4 page that you've laminated with a whiteboard pen. Could be a whiteboard with a pen that they could turn up every day. What are you working on tonight? So what are you working on tonight, Jack, when you're in training? What do you really want to work on? Because if you know what they're really working on, you can start praising and highlighting when they do it well, and start giving them some information that's actually relative to what they want. So it can be as simple as that. It could be simple as a whiteboard and a pen. It could be as high tech as, having a little picture of the player with a little line next to it saying I'm working on, and putting some information in. It could be, whatever you have time for. I guess the thought behind getting them to reflect on their own performance and highlighting something that they think they need to work on is more important than what it looks like.
So how do you develop them reflection skills that you mentioned in the players then? So you've set the objectives.
Yeah.
You've tried to help them support the process during the sessions. What's the bit that happens in between?
What, and how we set it, or after they've set it?
So how do you teach the players to reflect against what it is their learning objectives are?
Ask questions and embrace the silence sometimes, because ask good questions because you need to get them thinking about stuff, and then let them talk and let them listen, and make sure you're listening and letting them talk, because they'll start talking, and eventually something will come out that you can go, right, I'm going to pick on that bit, and that was a really good bit. What about that you do particularly? So I would say ask a lot of questions and make sure that you listen for starters, and then throughout the 6 weeks it's just a gentle reminder about, right, what are you working on tonight, Jack? I know we're working on playing through midfield, but what particularly are you looking at? What is it that you're looking at? Well, passing with your weaker foot, brilliant, okay. And then once you're clear on that, all you've got to do is shine the light on it when it happens. Or ask a question when he had the opportunity to do it. So if he didn't do it, Jack, what are you working on tonight again? Right, what would you do if you had that opportunity again? Brilliant, you might use your weaker foot, good lad. Or he's done it, Jack, I spotted that, top man. And you move on. So it's about asking good questions, getting them to have something that comes out, and hanging on that something, and then it's about shining the light on it when you do it or when they don't do it. And I guess that as you go, it doesn't have to be perfect now. It doesn't have to be perfect. So if you said working on my weaker foot, that's fine, that's brilliant. Next time we meet, it might be something more specific. Next time we meet, it might be even more specific. And as long as you understand that, it's just get a starting point with them. Get a starting point, because you can work on their reflections, and you'll do that by asking good questions.
And I suppose reinforcing the notion that learning doesn't happen in a straight line, and actually probably go backwards a lot of the time.
All over the place. Yeah, all over the place. And like I said before, our job is just to be there and support them.
And that reinforces what you were saying earlier about really getting to know and understand your players, because if you've got a squad of what sort of squad range sizes have you got that a coach would deal with?
You could safely say 15, 16.
Yeah, just pretty typical to what would be out there in grassroots for a 9 or 11-a-side team. So you've got 15 or 16 different individual learning plans that you're, as a coach, trying to keep in your head.
Yeah. There's
quite a lot
We've
going.
got two per age group coaches, so then you have 8, maybe 7 or 8 you've got per coach. But you've got a lot. And that's why coaching is difficult when you start trying to individualise it. But that's where it becomes its most effectiveness. That's where it becomes most effective, because it's about you. It's not about playing out from the back. It's about you.
So how, you've just sidetracked my thought there a little bit, but in a good way. So you've got, and this is something that, again, we have a lot in grassroots where you'll have coaches working as a pair, but often the relationship is coach, manager, or coach and cone picker-upper.
Yeah.
How do you get your coaches to work together for the benefit of the players?
Well, so my job is to obviously support the coaching staff that we've got, and then we have someone from the FA that comes in and supports us. And he did a bit of work, and he said, I'm going to watch how you work as a pair today. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. So I was working with our youth development phase lead, our 12 to 16 lead, and we had such good reflections afterwards, because we thought, that's all we see. And this is going back some months now, but you're right, you have one person that leads and you have one person that steps back, and then, right, it's my turn, I'm leading this bit, you step back. And actually, it's not about that. It's about, there's two of you here, there's a lot of knowledge and experience in the room, get in there and make it work. So it was a really good CPD event for us, because it really sort of awoke us to the fact that we're working as a pair. We don't just need to plan the session and the individual bits. We need to actually plan how we manage ourselves and the session. So that was a real learning curve for us. And that's something we've discussed with all the coaches since, really, about, let's take a team talk, for example. What are the key messages? Who's going to say it? And how is it going to be said? And actually, how often do you just go into a team talk and go, right, lads, blah, 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 and you just give them a load of information, and then I finish talking, and then my teammate, my coach mate, comes and he gives a load of information, and then the players leave with probably nothing. When actually, if we are coordinated and planned, we can say, right, there's 3 messages here, 2 of them are out of possession, so I'll take those, and then you finish off with the in possession one, and that's what we're going to finish on, so that they go out really feeling positive. That's such a coordinated way of working. So to answer your question, it's something that's been highlighted to us, and it's something that's really, really important and probably overlooked at times.
Yeah, I think it could be a real game changer, and it's something that I'm not particularly well practiced at myself, just purely because most of my own coaching career I've had the group on my own, and I think I've started to work with another coach now, and it's something that we're actively trying to get better at, is working together. So one of the things that we've tried to do is take a team each. So
manage the opposition.
So I might the boys. So we've tried to break down those individual plans again to what the boys are trying to get better at. So the players, to the best that we can, are we plan for the teams that we want to, or the players that we want matched up against one another. Yeah. That doesn't always work out, because you've got players who will have other commitments on, or illness or injury, we'll have a kind of a general thought of who we want playing against each other, and then there'll be so for example, the players that I might be working with could be out of possession, reacting to the moment that we lose the ball. And then the coach who I'm working with, he could be working with an in possession on counter attacking. So we've tried to
complements.
And it's still we're still learning. But it gives you a narrower focus and a smaller number of players to focus your own attention, and rather than worrying about the whole group.
I spoke to a good friend of mine on the way down over to you this morning, and he was saying that he's talking about something he calls spotlight coaching. So basically, the way they're going to work it is one of the coaches leads the session, and the other coach maybe picks a handful of players that he's going to focus on, so that he's looking at maybe 3 or 4 players and their ILPs, which again, just another way of doing it. I think what you said there about how if your coaches come together and manage the opposition, it can really complement your session, because it can highlight the learning outcome, really effectively. So I think that's a really good way of thinking. But again, going back to what I said earlier, as long as you're considering it, it's a good start. So if you're starting to talk to your mate and go, how are we going to do this? Who's going to do what? Who's going to say what? I think that's a real positive thing.
I don't want to leave you just there on players. There's plenty more I want to ask you about working with the players. But seeing as we're on the topic of coaches, there's some great questions again that came in around this. So what's the sort of process that you would go through within your club to recruit a coach, and what are some of the things that you'd be looking for within a coach?
Yeah, I mean, linking back to the EPPP, there's certain requirements that a coach needs to have to work in an academy. We've our foundation lead has set up something that's been really positive over the past 2 or 3 years. He has a group of volunteers that come in and sort of lead what we call pre-academy, which is basically anyone under 9 and below, and development centres. So again, similar sort of age group, but aren't with the main group. So we have a group of fantastic volunteers that come and just do so many things. It's unbelievable for us. They're and they coach as well, and we're sort of using that as almost like our coaching pathway and succession planning. So we've got some fantastic coaches that are in our pre-academy and development centres that are maybe going through their B licence at the moment. Maybe they've done their youth award but haven't got their B licence. So we're sort of supporting them through their B licence as they support us with our academy delivery and pre-academy delivery, and that's our pathway for our coaches. So when a coach moves on, we have a coach that's already sort of ingrained within the academy. He understands the values, the behaviours, the setup, that we can almost step right in. And that's something that our foundation leaders set up. I think it's an absolutely fantastic process that we've got. It gives us a real good indication of the people that we have in the building, and it's a great process to get good people into our academy as well. Without that, I think it's about building up relationships with local clubs, with local authorities, local county FAs, and making sure that you're aware of, the good, positive, proactive coaches that are out in your area, because there's plenty. I think if I was a coach looking for getting into a club, I think it's just about asking questions. That's, like I said to you earlier, when I was working in a local authority, I managed to get an opportunity in an academy just from asking loads of people, can I get in? And I started just going and watching. Then I got a scouting role. Then a coaching role came up, but it was volunteer. Then I managed to get a paid coaching role part-time. And then when I got made redundant from the council, I literally turned up every single day and just said, what can I do? Can I do something today? So I think the more you can... Now listen, that was easy for me because I'd been made redundant, so it was that or Jeremy Kyle. But if you've got a job, it's difficult. But we train in the evenings, we train the weekends, we have games on a Sunday, and all clubs do. So I think if you are keen to get into an academy, I think you've probably got to go and volunteer, so that you build up that relationship and that trust with the club, and showcase what you bring. Really, I think what you bring.
So what would be some of the things that you would look for when matching a coach with a certain age group? Are there certain qualities or skills or behaviours that would influence your decision of which age group to put a certain coach with?
I think firstly, I want our coaches to be curious. First and foremost, they need to be curious about the game, about themselves, about development. That's sort of non-negotiable, really. We need to make sure that we have people in there that have an open mind to learning and realise that they've got stuff to learn, and you'll always keep on learning. I think if we have that as a starter, you're in a really good spot. Then with regards to age groups, there is, you do start assigning people to age groups. So for example, I mean, we're really fortunate at our club. We have a really good link with a college, a football college, and we have a lot of football lecturers that actually come and work in our academy as well. So we're really fortunate. But basically, it's really about your personality and about your experiences that you have. So if you've got, if your experience is, let's say, you're maybe a bit older, you worked in non-league, and you work in education, higher education, for example, it'd be quite a big jump for you to go and then work with our under-9s. Whereas if you're a young kid, just got through their B licence and their youth award, experience of working in primary schools, it again would be a big jump for them to go and work with our under-16s. So I think it has to be about personality and about experiences that they've had. And that doesn't mean that they're stuck in that area. It just means that that's probably where they best match at that point in time. And I think when they're in at that point in time, then you have experience either side of that age group. So if you're an under-9 coach, you need to be going working with the 8s that we have in, and you need to be working with the 10s that we've got. So you need to broaden your horizons a little bit. But that initial sort of appointment, it's really based on personality and about experiences they have. bring.
I think one of the things that comes across there is the value of those experiences. So I lucky enough to get to speak and work with loads of ambitious coaches who want to find that way and forge that way into an academy.
Yeah.
And rightly or wrongly, we'll see maybe their sole route into there is just purely by qualifications. So, yeah. I mean, if you were, what advice would you give to a coach who is working in grassroots at the moment but has real aspirations to get into the academy network and start coaching within that?
Be prepared. It might start as a volunteer. It might start as a voluntary role. It might start with you just coming and observing, and actually it's just making contact with somebody within an academy, and I can really only go off sort of, what I did. And like I said, when I wanted to go and get that full-time role in coaching, I had 4 part-time coaching roles because I was just trying to do as much as I can to try and build up enough momentum to get into a coaching role. I think it's the same principle when you're working with an academy. I think it's about getting out, making sure you see a lot of academies, how they work, going and meeting people, offering your services, might even be in a voluntary capacity, and just almost getting yourself out there. Because I think there's a really good author, loads of his books, I think he's absolutely fantastic, and he talks about how it isn't the material, it's the person that people buy into. It's the person. And I know people use this, it's who you know, not what you know, and I disagree with that, because you've got to be able to do the job, but who you know is important because it's about building a relationship with somebody, and for me it's about the people. So what I would say is, be prepared that you might have to go and volunteer, be prepared that you might have to go and observe and just be on the outskirts for some time until you build up that relationship or that opportunity opens for you to step in. And then when you step in, showcase what you can do. But yeah, it's tough because there's, particularly in the Northwest, there's a lot of people and a lot of coaches, and there is a lot of clubs, but there's a lot more coaches than there are clubs. So I imagine it's difficult. I do imagine it's difficult, but I think if you really want it, I think it's about being proactive. Going and meeting people in academies, asking to come and observe, asking if there's anything that they can do, asking if I can volunteer. And I think that was a bit of advice that I'd probably given myself a long time ago, because when I was at Blackpool and I worked in the academy part time and I just kept turning up, so many opportunities came to me just by me asking and by being there. And if I'd just stayed at home that day and done something else, I wouldn't have had that opportunity to work with a certain player or watch a certain manager work. And I had actually so many opportunities by just going and just being around there, And there's loads of people, if you talk to them, that are in full-time football at the moment that have had similar tales where they've just gone and done stuff, even if it's just observing.
Yeah. Actually, that reminds me of a topic that I like to wind you up and get you talking about, which is practice design. Yeah. So give us some of your thoughts and your views on that and where you are at the moment with it.
Where am I at the moment? The important thing is game realism. It's got to be realistic to the game. But it's about, what does the game look like for that player at that time? So if he's a 9-year-old, what does the game look like? If he's 18, what does the game look like? And we need to make sure that the practice mirrors what they actually go and play. So that for me has been a challenge, because obviously I've come from one area from the FA where we're talking about principles, and then I've come into an area where actually it's the real specifics. I have to nail down. If I'm doing a session in and around the box, it has to look like what our attacks look like in and around the penalty box. We need to have the right numbers. It needs to be in the right area of the pitch. Patterns need to be similar, etc., etc., etc. So that's been a real challenge for me, but that's a real important thing, that the practice has to look like the game.
Yeah, and that's something that in my own practice recently, I get a third of an AstroTurf. But I did something that really opened my eyes, and I don't know how. I've never done this before, but I was trying to think of ways that I can use every yard of space that I've got to my disposal. And what I did was I had a map of a pitch printed out, and then I got a post-it note, roughly the same size of the third of the pitch.
Okay.
And all I started to do was take that post-it note and just move it around.
So see which areas.
And turned it 90 degrees and just shifted it around just to give and just
very
to promote.
Creative, isn't it?
Very, I know. It's like Blue Peter, just to get some ideas of the sort of distances, and it's really got me thinking about how I can use space more creatively, because you talked about realism there, and realism. I suppose if you're looking at the detail of realism, are the players making realistic decisions? But it goes to right down to distances between players.
Yep.
So, and one of the things that this has done is made me just start to think about how we use the space within this third. So, practice that we did last Wednesday night was set up. So, the goalkeeper's area the penalty area is 44 yards wide, but the area that we have is 33.
Okay.
So, playing a small-sided game, but the goalkeeper can now pick the ball up. It's basically a line straight across the pitch.
Yeah.
So at least we're trying to give the goalkeeper
reference points.
A little bit more. It's still not 44 by 18, but it's 33 by 12, for example.
Yeah,
so it's trying to make those spaces more realistic, and then importantly, the distance between, say, the edge of the box and where the halfway line would be. So suddenly now we've got a halfway line going across this third of the pitch, where the play starts in, and again, there's your reference point for what would be offside in a match. So
exactly.
I don't know if that mirrors anything that you're doing in your own practice.
100%. It just has to look like the game. It has to look like the game. We got, some of the things that annoy me. If you're lucky enough to have the space, you need to use the part of the pitch that aspect happens on. So if you're doing something in and around the box, then the practice has to be in and around the box, otherwise it's not relevant to the players. If you're not lucky enough to have the space, you need to be creative, like you were saying there, around how you use the space and how you provide those reference points for the players. So, for example, an area for the goalkeeper is really important, because when you take a goal kick, players need to be outside of the area, and that's a reference point to keep the game real. So reference points are really important, the distances between the units, but it has to look like the game for them, not for a first teamer, for them. So if you're working with under nines, it has to look like under nine game, not a full first team game.
And you just reminded me of something there that is really important, I think, when you're designing practices, is actually thinking of things that either do or can't happen within the laws of the game. And it reminded me of a story you told me a while back now about your daughter's tennis lesson.
Yes. Now listen, he was trying the best that he could with the resources he had to him at the time. But I mean, my daughter was 5, and I took her to this tennis lesson because she wanted to go. And I struggled through these sort of things, so I was stood there sort of biting my lip, really, not to say anything. But we had, as you probably term, a bus queue, a net in the middle. You had one bus queue on one side and one bus queue on the other. She was handed a tennis racket that was the size of her body, and I think she got 2 goes to hit a ball in about 40 minutes time. She hit one, didn't go over the net, and she missed the other one. So you can look at the stats of her learning outcomes during that session, and it was not the best. And they were sat down and talked about details about Rafael Nadal and Federer, and she was a 5-year-old girl who'd never really watched tennis on telly, having to put up with that. And the funny bit is, on the way home, when I asked her about, did you enjoy it? Yeah. Well, what was the best part of it? Well, I got to chat with Jessica for extra time after school, and that's the bit that she enjoyed. And then about 10 minutes later, she said to me, "Daddy," and I said, "Yeah." She goes, "What's a Nadal?" And you think, geez, that's just no relevance to her. And really, if you think about, well, what should it look like for somebody who's 5? Well, maybe it looks like balloons. Maybe it's using their hands and they're just playing with their partners because it's hand-eye coordination. So it was a funny sort of story, and I know I've spoken to you about it in the past, but it just highlights that it has to be relevant to their age and stage of development, and not to what we think the game looks like at the end point, because they're not at that end point. So if we're ever practicing the game, we need to make sure if we're setting up a practice, we need to start with what does the game look like for that player at that point, and then work backwards from there. And if you can pull out patterns and pictures and things that happen in that game and transfer that into your practice, then you're onto an absolute flyer. Because that's where the transfer of learning will happen, because they'll come across that pattern in the game.
And so to get those realistic pictures, you mentioned about the use of video before. How do you even use the video technology to maybe freeze frame and work back from there?
Yeah. I mean, it's really useful. We were actually talking about this in the office the other day about, and I think a friend of mine put something up on Twitter as well about how, freeze framed and sort of took the numbers that are in that area and tried to make a practice out of it. For me, practice design, I think we tend to overcomplicate it. For me, and we're looking at our coaching curriculum at the moment, but we've got sort of 8 to 10 best practice sessions, and they're just templates. And you can play around with those templates, but really, if you keep creating new practices, the players just spend time learning the practice, not the game. And what we need to do is keep the practice really simple and teach them the game within the practice. So for me, the simpler the practice, the more effective the learning can come from it. And I just tend, what I see is I see a tendency to overcomplicate sessions, and they don't need to be simple. And there's some real good stuff. The boot room, for example, talked about thirds, channels, halves. How simple is that? But think about the learning outcomes you can get from just splitting up a pitch, playing a game, but splitting up the pitch in those areas and maybe putting some constraints onto those practices. So for me, if what I'm looking for from our coaches is just to keep the practice simple and make sure that we're teaching stuff that happens within the game.
I remember being a newly qualified 20-year-old, spent a summer out in the States for a few months, and I came back and it might have been on a course actually, and the tutor said, how do you know if you're a good coach? And I, embarrassed of me to now, said something like, well, I did 12 weeks coaching 5 days a week, and I never did the same practice twice.
Yeah.
Thinking, oh great, well look at this, I can make all these practices up. And soon got hit back down to earth when the much more experienced person than me said, well, how do you know if the players have learnt?
Yeah.
And I didn't have an answer, and it was so true. And I used to think that, well, if you've got loads of sessions, you've got loads of practices, then surely you must be a good coach. Well, what you're saying there is that you've got some, without overcomplicating it, the importance of revisiting and giving players the chance to have another go and develop over a period of time.
Yeah, massively. Yeah, massive. And like you said, if you're doing the same practice or the same template, you can start to measure how they're doing. Are they actually taking this on? Are they learning? Are they getting better? Is he learning? Is he struggling? Whereas if, like you say, if you're doing a different session every week, the players will spend majority of the time learning your new session rather than the game itself.
And that's a frustration I see often with coaches when they'll have a new practice that they want to work with the players, and it might take half of the session before the players quite understand the practice to any sort of level that the coach already does.
Yeah.
So that patience is so important, isn't it?
And if you're coaching as well, they need time to learn that. So you can't go in and start coaching after 3 minutes or 4 minutes, because they might still be learning the game. Let them play for a bit, let them understand and realise that the first part of this practice is them learning the practice. Once they learn the practice, then we can start supporting them with the game principles. And
looking through the player's eyes, actually, when you're doing something new, that can be quite a daunting prospect for a young player. They're in front of their peers. They might not fully understand what they're meant to do. They might not have the confidence to speak up and ask the coach. And if they've got a question or they don't quite understand the practice, that can be quite a nerve-wracking time for a young
100%,
player.
Yeah. I guess the point comes back to it's about adding layers, isn't it? Detail. It's about adding layers. We don't need to give them everything today. We need to give them a little bit. And actually, I remember we've chatted about, level 1, and the coach come back after 4 or 5 weeks saying, I've done all those games, what else have you got for me? And it's like, well, listen, it's great that you've gone off and practiced all those games, but just let's go back to this one game, think about the amount of topics that you could teach from that one game, and really, even if you just pick one topic, there might be 4 or 5 sections to that topic, and we might just look at one part of that section this week, and then we might build on it next week. And like you said, if they're having to learn the new game, you don't actually get underneath to get the detail of the information you're trying to get across. You just get the superficial learning, the practice. So for me, simplify your practice, have a handful of good templates that you can use that are simple to understand and allow you to draw out the information that happens in the game.
So jumping back over to players now, I said we were going to go around the houses with this conversation, but how do the players respond then to that consistency of approach, whether it be through behaviours, through practice, through the wider environment? What are you getting back?
Well, consistency of behaviour creates culture, doesn't it? That's behaviour drives culture. So what it does is it provides a sort of standard to live and work by. So that's why it's essential. So if we're consistent with our behaviours, what do we get back? With the same behaviours. Yeah, and that's what we're looking for.
So if you were to take your, say, under 11s now, how many of that squad have been with you since they first joined the club? What's the kind of retention rate like within the club?
Really high. Yeah, really high. I'd say probably, without having the figures next to me, I mean, you're looking at 90-95%. Wow. Yeah, particularly in the younger ages. I mean, what we look to do is, any player that comes in at 9, we look to give them to under 11, so that they have some time to get used to being in this environment, get used to training in an evening till late, getting home late. You know, we can't be judging a player 6 months into their under 9 season, can we? I think that's wrong. So we have, you know, an approach where we say if you're in the foundation phase for the duration of the foundation phase, unless there's some real outlying incidents or situation that means that we have to change that. That's what we'd like to try and achieve anyway. But yeah, I mean, the progression through is really quite high. Obviously, the higher up you go, the less opportunity there is. So that triangle gets smaller, because that's elite football. You know, it's elite anything really, business, sport, whatever it is. You know, there's very few at the top of the game, and that's the same in any sort of area. But the retention rate throughout the academies is actually quite positive, and I think it'll be that at most academies, to be honest.
I can imagine. I think you alluded to it before that signing and releasing players is probably the most difficult part of the job.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you're looking for before you sign a player, and likewise release?
Something that sets them apart from everyone else. I think, you know, whether it's could be anything, a dribbler, someone who gets shots off, someone that looks comfortable on the ball. It's something that sets them apart from the rest of the group, really.
In what group? Within
their group, yeah.
So you would bring a player into and invite them in to train with the...
Yeah, I mean, the process that we have, you know, a recruitment team that go out and look at hundreds and thousands, I'm sure, of players, and basically they go through this process, and then if they meet certain criteria, then they get brought into the sort of main group, and then we have them in for a 6-week period, which in some ways is a long time, in some ways isn't, because you know, it's difficult to judge anybody, never mind a kid, in 6 weeks. But that's the process that we have in place, where they come in for 6 weeks. You know, we try and play them in the position that they think that they play. We might offer them a secondary position to try and have a look at. We ask them to do whatever it is that they were spotted for in the first place. So if they're a dribbler, show us that you're a dribbler, but try and show us this and this as well. So for example, if they're coming in as a wide player, you know, we might ask them to look at dribbling, because that's what you're good at, but I'd also like you to see if you can, you know, cross the ball when you can, and can you work hard when we haven't got the ball. So we're trying to drip feed some of the stuff that we're looking from a club perspective in there as well. But you know, it's a snapshot, and there's so many good players out there. It's you know, it's difficult, and we've got to be quite selective, really. The older up they get, it becomes a little bit more position specific, because the spaces that we have for an under 18 is limited. So we have to make sure that we're, well, as best as we can, that we're getting the right players in to the right parts of our team. Yeah. That'll give them the best opportunity to show themselves in a good light, you know.
So recruitment decisions, so you mentioned quite a lot of the technical, tactical stuff there. Is there any sort of qualities or traits that you're looking for wider across the...
Yeah, so I mean, our head of recruitment is actually from one of the talent ID courses I think he went on. He actually delivers the course as well, so we're very lucky. But he's some CPD we did with the scouts was around, really we're looking at sort of resilience. So what some of the stuff we were asking for was, yes, the technical and tactical stuff, but how does he react when he's subbed? How does he react when he lost? How does he react when the ref gives the decision the wrong way? How does he react? So we're looking at trying to bring the right people in as well. Saying that, he's a kid, so if there's no chance he's going to be perfect in all of those areas. So at some point you need to make a decision to say, right, he's not perfect here, but this is enough for us to give him an opportunity, and let's see if we can enhance what he already does well and support the areas that he needs support with.
So would your scouts have any sort of dialogue with the coach? So if, let's say it was a grassroots team that was being scouted, would there be any sort of discussion with the coaches about the sort of players that...
There's a process that they have to go through, obviously, that's that all the recruitment staff are educated in. But yeah, it's, like I said earlier, really, it's about relationships. It's about, really, we want people to call us to tell us that they've got a really good player that we want to give an opportunity to, rather than us having to go and beg off people. Beg's probably the wrong word, but you know what I mean, about trying to draw a player away, which was like the old view of, he's trying to steal my players, and it shouldn't be about that, really. It should be about just giving an opportunity to a kid, really. So we are trying to be proactive to build those relationships so that actually people come to us and go, listen, we've got a really good kid here, can you at least have a look at him, or maybe send someone down to have a look at him? And I think that links back to what you said earlier on about having good relationships with grassroots clubs. That's how important it is, because we all have to be on the same page. We're all trying to help the kid. We're all doing it in different ways. And
you've had some success stories though, haven't you? Recently, I mean, one of your players just started playing in the first team.
Yeah, he's had an absolutely fantastic start to the season. I think he played sort of 10 games on the trot for the first team, which is unbelievable.
And what age is he?
19 now, but he was 18 when he broke in, which, to go from under 18 football to first team football and championship is unbelievable feat for him. So
what do you know about his pathway that he's gone on to get to that point?
Been in the academy since under 9s, so it's a real, like I said, a real success story for the academy. I've only come in right at the end and had very little influence, so by no means am I, taking credit for this, but for the academy, it's an unbelievable achievement, really, to have someone in from under 9 to then be playing in the championship. I mean, the staff can be so proud of themselves because it's just brilliant, and the kid can be, obviously so proud of himself as well. His journey, up and down from what I've heard. Speed bumps, loads of highs, a lot of lows, a lot of positive times, a lot of negative times, and I think that's, for anything, if we are going to use this as a lesson, I think that's the biggest lesson to take away, is that the fact that, yes, he has done that, but the journey at times, he'd probably felt really low, and there'd been times where really the tensions were quite visible between club and the coaches, and I think that's a lesson to learn, is that you said it earlier on, but success isn't linear. It's up and down, it's highs and lows, and he definitely had those. Talk about positions, he's played in every position, I think, apart from goalkeeper. So that's as another lesson to say that actually, and is he going to be forever in that position that he's in now? Who knows? He might get moved around like many professionals do. So he's a real mixed bag, highs and lows, different positions, different games, played up, played down. Yeah, a real mixed bag. And
when we spoke about this player last time, one of the things that we realised was the variance of his experiences as a player, but the actual little amount of those competitive matches that you'd mentioned.
I guess it's how you define competitive.
True, yeah.
I'd like to think that he's had a lot of competitive games, because everything that we do should be competitive. That's healthy. But yeah, where 3 points matter,
that's the one.
In inverted commas, I mean, really, a league table only came in when he was playing for the under-18s. So you're looking at 2 seasons that he's played.
So
with the
until
league
under-18s,
table.
he'd never played a game where 3 points for a win in a league.
No, because if you think about it, if he's been in academy football since under 9s, we don't publish league tables. They've just brought in now that under 16s they have a competitive league that you can opt in of. and not all clubs opt in into the league. So how serious it's taken, I'm not sure, but it wasn't there when he was an under 16 player. So so the first time he would have played for 3 points was when he was an under 17 player, which is quite interesting, really, when you think about it. I don't know, what the evidence proves, but that was the first time, he'd have played competitive football, really. Well, competitive in the terms of 3 points for a win.
And did you guys opt into the under 16?
We have. Yeah. We did opt straight in, because it's a good opportunity for them. For me, I think it's important. They need to see a league table. I've been in Ireland quite a bit recently, and I'm watching how competitive their sort of games program is at a grassroots level, and how winning, and there's relegations and promotions and stuff with their even under 12s, and it blew me away a little bit. And I'm not saying that's the right way to go, but it's definitely an experience we wanted to give to our under 16s in preparation for next year. So I think it's a good stepping stone towards what they're going to face if they become an under 18 player, next season. Yeah,
and it reminds me, I think it was John O'Sullivan who's changing the game project over in the States. He's done loads of great work, and I think it was a quote that I'd
TED Talk as well.
Yeah, and I think it was a quote that he'd said where it's competition in youth sports is healthy, provided it's the children that are competing, not the adults.
Not the parents.
No, it wasn't actually John. I'm pretty sure it was a guy called Rob Wolf. I'll find out the reference anyway, and I'll put it in there. But I think that's really important, that competition is healthy. As long as it's the right people that are competing.
It's not about the parents and the coaches, it's about the kids, and like I said earlier, kids will deal with it and move on, and I think we've got to embrace the fact that they are bouncy and resilient. Let's embrace that.
And they do, and they pick up on everything that you say, and the nuance and the language that is used, and so how have you tried to shape the language that you use with the players, and what's the importance of that?
I think a big learning for me is language has been a massive learning about how we use it and the impact it has. And I think, I've done a lot of reading around positive psychology, NLP, just loads of different stuff. And I'm not saying that they're the answer to everything, but you take good bits from everything that you read. And my dad as well has done a lot of reading and done a few courses. And I remember him talking when going back to Emily, and she's running around the house, and I cringe every time she runs, just never mind around the house. But she goes to gymnastics, and I can only watch half the lesson, because half the lesson is the warm-up, and then the other half is tumbling and stuff, and I can't even watch that. So I only watch half a lesson every week. But when she's running around the house, and I'd be going, Emily, don't run. And my dad just said one day, he said, all she hears is run. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And he's right. It's like the don't think of a pink elephant. It's the pink elephant that jumps straight into your head, and it's because we can't process the negative part. So actually, if you just reinforce the fact that we walk in this house, it's a subtle change, but that's a behaviour, and it's a reinforcing behaviour. And that's a big lesson, and that's what I've sort of tried to take into coaching, and I think it's just about choosing your language. And listen, do I get it right every time? No chance.
So what would some of the specific changes you've made in your coaching environment when you've considered the language that you use?
Well, just if you even just consider, the environment, the behaviours that we have in the academy, it's very simple to say we don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. But actually it's, well, here we do this. This is what we do in our academy. This is how we behave. It's a real subtle change, and you might, it might appear nothing, but it makes a difference. Firstly, it's not negative, so I'm not having a go at you. It's not me against you. It's we do this here, and it's suddenly it's drawing you closer to me rather than me pushing you away, rather than me against you. It's actually drawing you closer because we do this. Me and you, and everyone else here. We do this together. So it's something that I really consider, and I know a lot of our coaching staff do as well. Consider the language that you use, because it has a big impact.
One of the changes I've tried to make in my own coaching is so we have a coaches WhatsApp group within our club.
Yeah.
And just simply change it, instead of saying my under 14s, our under 14s.
Yeah.
And just being really considerate and conscious about that, because that it's a collective club thing rather than just my team.
A mistake I've made or a learning opportunity if you want to think a language. But I talked about speed bumps earlier, and at the start of the season I talked about how we might play players up and we might play players down. Actually we play across. Are you an under 14 player, or are you an academy player? So actually playing across age groups makes a massive difference compared to playing down or playing up. Playing up could be daunting. It could be a success. It could be a win. Playing down could be, why am I doing that? It's a negative. It's playing across. It's a subtle difference, but it can make a big impact. And that's something so like I said, that's something that I'm still learning and still trying to practice, really.
That's really interesting. I want to jump on to some of the more miscellaneous questions as we draw to a close here, if that's all right, Matt.
Of course.
So
you'll have another delivery coming anyway.
No, I'm sure the postman will be back at some point. So what do you find is the biggest challenge within your role then? So it's a couple of years now and really got to grips with it. What's the biggest challenge that you face within your role?
Good question. I think it's probably just about making sure that everyone is aligned. We've got some really good people, and a lot of clubs do have really good people, but subtle changes or differences in how you think things should be can make a big difference. So I think it's just about making sure that we're all aligned and doing the same things, providing the same experience with the same purpose and thought across all the age groups. And that's difficult because we've got a lot of age groups, a lot of staff, that are all really good, but it's just about aligning them all. So that's probably the biggest challenge. Not that it's difficult working with the staff. The staff are great, but it's just trying to align everybody to one thing is difficult just because of the sheer numbers and size of what we do and how we do it.
Yeah, and flipping it, then what's the part of the role that you gain the most satisfaction from?
Working with players. Everything for me is about people, I think, and that's what I think this head of coaching role is about, bringing people together. It's about connecting the dots. So, if my answer was anything but, working with people, I think I'm probably in the wrong job. But I really enjoy working with the staff, and I really, really enjoy working with the players, particularly over a long period of time when you get to see them taking things on board and them coming to you with stuff, to say, I tried that, it worked, and you think, brilliant. Or I tried that and it didn't work. Well, what are you going to do now then? So working with players and people is brilliant. It's a great job.
Which then jumps me on to the next one. So what's the best investment that you've made in yourself as a coach?
I think probably learning about other things apart from football, if that makes sense. As in psychology, positive psychology. I mentioned NLP before, language, how we learn, all that side, I think has really added value to what I do. And I think that's been the biggest learning, because there's a lot of things that you have to know the technical and tactical stuff. That's important because it's the game and you need to be able to help it. But you could know all of that stuff, but if you don't know the people and you can't get your message across and you don't provide clarity, you're knocking your head against a brick wall. It's how you get that message across which is the most important bit. So for me, stopping at, I know how to strike a football, that's not good enough. I need to be able to know how my player's reacting to why he's getting frustrated, why is he struggling to do that, why is he behaving the way he is, how can I support him, how can I put that message across. So for me, the biggest investment and the most effective investment was about learning about psychology and about how people learn and how people develop.
So where would you point a coach, what direction would you point a coach in who's interested in finding out more about that?
I think Damien Hughes is a fantastic author. There's some really good books out there that you could get. Simon Hartley is another one around clarity and around how to work with elite teams. I really enjoyed reading about NLP. I know there's people that sort of knock it and don't agree, but for me it's just about taking the bits that I think are relevant and positive psychology. So there's a great book called The Art of Being Brilliant, and I just love it. It's such a positive book. It just spins things on its head and it gives you some ideas on how we can, make people happy. And, when people are happy and engaged, they learn more. And I think that's our job really, is to help them learn. And if we can make them feel all right about themselves and make them feel that they're in a place where people care about them, then I think they're going to learn a lot more.
And I suppose that leads on to another question that we had come in, which would be, what advice would you give to your younger self when you were starting out coaching?
Do more. So I mentioned before, when I got made redundant from local authority, I did a lot, and I went out and was really proactive. I could have done that when I was at uni, and I didn't. I remember having the opportunity to go on a level 2. That was, I think it only cost me £20 to go and do my level 2 because they subsidised it. And I didn't do it because it was on a weekend and a couple of evenings, and you just think, God, if I'd have done that then, what other doors might have opened? Would that door have opened a bit earlier for me? Would I be doing different things now? So I would just say, just do more, and be prepared to put in the extra stuff, and take what you need from everything that you're doing. So if you're doing a community session and you've got 3 people that turn up, you can look at it in 2 ways. You can be negative about it because I've only got 3 people here, what's the point in what I'm doing? Or actually you can be positive about it because I'm getting to really understand these kids, and I'm getting to deal with odd numbers. I'm getting to deal with having to, inspire and educate and teach 3 people. So I think take what you need from everything that you do, and don't let something pass by without you taking something from it, because there's a learning opportunity everywhere. Even if you've had a really crap day, or you've gone on this course that you think was shit, you can get anything from anything. And I think don't let an opportunity pass you by where you haven't taken something from that experience.
It's weird that you mentioned that. We had Aaron Danks. We were lucky enough to have Aaron Danks come in and do some work with our team just last week, and one of the things that he mentioned in his talk was the value that he got from those early experiences. Sounds very much similar to your own. I think it was local authority coaching work in a tough area, Wolverhampton, but what he said, he wanted to make sure that every time he worked with those group of players, it might not have been where he wanted to be at that moment in time, but he was making damn sure that those players were going to have the best experience, or that he was going to have he was going to be at his best every single time that he worked with those players. And what came across was he's so humble from these, and I think from those backgrounds and those early roots into coaching.
I think it's really important. I think that was some of the messages that I saw when I was doing some mod 2s and mod 3s, is that you meet some great people, but you meet some people that on the first day of a course are asking you when the next course is. And I think it's just devaluing what you're doing, and probably overlooking the importance of what you're doing, and trying to rush to the next point. And for me, it's be as good as you can be right now, and then something else might happen. And that for me is the important bit. Do what you can as well as you can, and the next opportunity will definitely happen.
I suppose that links to what I was just saying about giving everything for your players at that moment in time, rather than thinking so far ahead. And really taking the time to invest in who you're working with and understanding those players that are in front of you.
And there's, I remember doing a mod 1, and there was a gentleman at the end of the course. We do some feedback, and we asked for feedback from the candidates, and he sort of, I was chatting with him on his table with a cup of tea, and I said, go on, give us some feedback. And he was nicey, and I said, no, come on, give us some real feedback. And he went, okay. He said, stop making me discuss things and just tell me what I need to do. And I thought, I said, well, what do you mean? He said, listen, I'm busy. He said, I'm busy. I have my own business. I work really long hours. I haven't got time for you to have this discussion. I just want you to tell me how I can be a better coach. And I thought, that was really interesting. So we had a really good chat, but for me, it was the drive home, and I was thinking, that's really important. I didn't get to know him well enough so that I could tailor the course to meet his needs, because he needed something different. And that links back to what I said earlier on about, you might have a team of 16, but you've got 16 individual players. You need to make sure you know those players and make sure you meet the needs of that players in that session. for whatever he needs at that moment in time.
And sometimes that player might mean telling the player, helping them
of course it
solve
does.
that problem.
Yeah, 100%. You know, as long as telling isn't the first thing you go to, in my opinion, because if we want, you know, like I said before, we want decision makers and people that can learn. You know, as long as telling isn't the first thing that you go to. Sorry. Yeah, of course, it might mean that they need telling. Sometimes it might mean that they just might need leaving alone. They might have had a bad day in school or be going through a rough time, and maybe all they need is praise or nothing. Just be left alone and just make sure that they're okay. You know, and then if you get to know the players, you get to understand them. You can support them in what they need at that moment in time. And remember, they don't need to be a professional tomorrow. So we've actually got 10 years to do stuff. So today they might just need to get a pat on the back and say, well done, I hope you're okay, and you know, we'll pick up the technical detail tomorrow, for example.
Yeah. So understanding the players and what their baseline behaviours are, I think, is really important.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you need to understand that, because then when something's out of the ordinary, you know,
is it really out of the ordinary?
Is it out of the ordinary? Yeah. And you know, we're coaches have a lot of time with kids. You know, we could be the only positive male role model that kid has. You know, and this is why I said to you before, it's about people. It's much, much bigger than them being a player. You know, it's him being a child, and we could be the only positive role model that they have. So we need to make sure we're really looking after the person, and the player will follow. That'll come if we follow our processes right. You know, and that'll come. But we need to care about the kid first.
Last question then. What have you changed your mind about on your coaching journey?
Probably quite a few things, to be honest. I think that's quite healthy, though. Well, I hope it's quite healthy. Firstly, I go back to the command. I think I probably always thought that command was something that I shouldn't do, particularly after I've been on the courses. And I think over the past probably 3 or 4 or 5 years, I've realised that it's a really impactful tool. You just need to understand when and where to use it and why you're using it. So that would be one. Similar reasons, constant practice. You know, I spent a lot of time working with coaches who only have an hour a week with a kid, and I would say don't be using constant practice because you've only got an hour with them. And I probably started to talk myself into the fact that constant practice, there was no place for it, but there is a place for it. There's definitely a place for it when we've got the under-18s in 6-7 days a week. You know, there's a place for constant practice. So I think it's around context and understanding. So it links back to you understanding why you do something and being able to justify it. And then I think the last thing, and probably the most important thing, is from my reading, realising that every intent is positive. So everything that a person does, they're doing it with the best intentions to help themselves, and that can look in a million ways. It might look really negative, it might be something that's really horrible, but they're doing their best at that time. And I think what we need to understand is, or if we understand that intent is positive, firstly we become a lot less stressed, which I've realised, and I've recognised that I don't get as stressed with players or with coaches or with sessions, because I realise that we're all trying our best. And I think once you understand that, it allows us to have clarity over how we can help them. So instead of if something they've done, instead of them doing something and annoying you and getting under your skin, and you suddenly you become clouded with anger and frustration, and that red mist comes over. If you understand that their intentions are positive, you should stay calm and you can remain calm, which means you can make a more informed decision on how best to respond in that situation or to support that player in that situation. So I think that's probably something that I've learned maybe over the last sort of 18 months through some of the reading that I've been doing. You know, that every intent is positive, and I think it's really helped me manage myself and then select the right process at that right time.
I think that's a great place to bring our conversation to a close, Matt. And I can't thank you enough for giving up your time today.
Absolute pleasure.
It's been great to see you again and catch up. I think if there's one thing that has reminded me of or one quality, a trait that really hits home about you as a person, it's your passion and integrity and wanting to do the right thing. And that was something that I remember when we used to work in the same team together, that really shone through. And
thanks very much.
I would say probably even more so now. So, no, thanks for giving up your time, Matt. Really appreciate it. Judging by the amount of questions that we had before this, I can imagine there'll be probably tenfold that have come out after coaches listen to this. If they want to ask you a little bit more or go into some more depth, can they connect with you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Twitter, and I'm sure you can pop that up on the sort of podcast information. Feel free to sort of message me on there. I'll get back to you. I'll always reply, and I'll always respond. And if it's something specific or personal, feel free to sort of message me on there or ask me for my email, and I'll reply to you with my email, so you can contact me there. And I think one thing that I learned when I was sort of younger, and I remember sending out a letter back then, because there wasn't emails. I sent a letter to as many clubs as I possibly could, and I remember getting a response from one, and that one response I think made me feel £1 million really, because of all the negatives I'd had or not had. So I think one thing that I've made certain is that I will respond to everybody and try and help. Obviously we get a lot of requests to come in and look at the academy and stuff, and if we can do it, we will. If we can't, I'll try and signpost you to something else, but feel free to get in touch, and like I said, if I can help, I'll gladly do so.
Fantastic. And is there anything that I haven't asked you that was in your copious notes that we haven't discussed?
No, I just know how prepped you are, so I wanted to make sure I could combat some of the questions that came my way. No, it's been a pleasure.
Great.
Mate.
Well, hopefully the guys listening have been able to follow the random path that we've gone down over the last couple of hours. And thanks again. Really enjoyed it, Matt.
You're welcome. Thanks,
Cheers.
mate.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please help spread the word or leave us a review on iTunes. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode. You can reach me on Twitter @JackWalton1, and don't forget to follow Liverpool FA @Liverpool_CFA. See you next time.
Basically, it's about giving them some sort of trauma, in inverted commas, failure.
Hello? The doorbell. Wait there. I'll be back in a minute.
I think you should leave this in.
Oh, I'm gonna, definitely.
Because it'll weed out the real listeners.
There you go. You think you can prepare for every eventuality, just like in a coaching session, and then the postman rings the doorbell.